historically, how have Muslims and Christians thought about refugees?
Oh, my mind is going somewhere else. Well, I will just have your thought first and then I think.
I mean, my father tried to be a refugee in 3 different countries, running for his life from the king of Afghanistan, and tried to find refugee status in Iran, tried to find refugee status uh, in in um, in Pakistan, and the answer he got from both of those places was no. They just were not going to accept him as a refugee. He snuck into those countries, so he didn't like look at their policy and say,
Yeah.
I'm gonna like, you know, he tried to get in the right way, couldn't get in the right way, then he tried to get in the wrong way, right?
And of course, there was no right and the wrong
Right,
way.
and then you're not allowed to stay, and then you can't go back, and then next thing you know, you're getting pushed around. And then he finally was able to go into Turkey, and just by basis of his ethnicity as an Uzbek, able to kind of parlay that into some kind of refugee status. I think he was very lucky. But you know, on the Islamic side, like particularly in a postmodern world, I feel like that's my experience with it, right? Like, um, Turkey took in a lot of refugees from a lot of different countries. Um, it's not harmonious. It's not smooth. They're having the same problems every other country that took a lot of people from different cultures in, um, you know, and a lot of resentment, right, within those countries by their citizens. Like they're getting things that I'm not getting. I mean, I hear that from, Turks all the time, right? Like they're getting things that I'm not getting. They're getting money. They're getting, a place to live. They're getting apartments. My cousin can't find a place to live, but we're putting those people in, you know, in apartments and everything else like that. And, Iraqis can just come in and buy citizenship now and all this other stuff. So I was joking with my mom. I'm like, well, then what you need is you need like your own Turkish Trump, we're like, we went back and forth on names, and I'm like, you should just call him Mustafa Trumpolu.
Okay, so let me ask you this. So, early on in Islam, the Meccans become the Muhajirun, right? Muhajirin, the people that immigrate and are functionally refugees from Mecca to Medina. How much do you think that plays into the mindset of like the modern Muslim psyche as far as taking in refugees and immigrants?
I mean, Osama bin Laden. What you guys talking about?
You guys went there.
That's what my mind was going to,
Okay, so elaborate for the audience.
Yes. So Osama bin Laden was a Saudi national, right? So he took refuge in Afghanistan, technically. Okay. We'll not get into details of like what ideology he was promoting, and okay, that was the ideologies were matching, but all to say is that Afghans gave him refuge, right?
Yeah.
And when the United States demanded that we have no business with you, we need this man, then they say no, he is our guest, right? We in our tradition, and where the tradition comes from, it's Islamic tradition or Afghan tradition. Anyway, it's always
It's part of Pashtunwali.
right? And Pashtunwali is like it has long roots in Islamic history, long roots for long time. Pashtuns are Muslim, right? So that's one element. And of course, if we look at Muslim world, Islam always talked about refugees, and it's talked in a way that you need to be welcoming towards refugees. Whoever take refuge in your place, you have to open. And of course, this element is still alive. For example, if you go to any Arab country, into any countryside, I'm not talking about city life, countryside, they'll open the doors for you. They'll welcome you. Doesn't matter what your skin color is, how do you look, whether you can speak a language or not, they'll still be welcoming towards you. And that's a one positive aspect that I see living in the East, and what I I mean, less see in the West, let's put it this way. I have not visited the countryside of the United States, so I do not have a say how that countryside life looks like. But that to say,
I mean, not here, but maybe like I have experienced that in like the South, you know, not necessarily like in the Pacific Northwest. I have experienced in the Pacific Northwest and East Coast. It actually happens quite a bit. Like it's kind of weird that you would think that everyone over there is just a rude jerk, but they they really aren't. Like they will like, you know, they'll yell at you for like not being homeless, and then they'll be like, "Get in here, eat something, dummy." Like,
So, but I think so. Then to summarize, there is generally a part of the sort of Islamic imagination that refugees, immigrants are someone you should welcome and show hospitality to.
but there is a big but. It's Muslim religious oriented.
mhm.
For example, it's different if a Christian wants to take refuge in a Muslim world than a Muslim. For example, Pakistan took a lot of Afghans. Why they took a lot of Afghans? Muslim brothers. And the notion that was building that these are our Muslim brothers that are suffering. It's our responsibility to take care of them. Turkey, of course, Turkey is very less Islamic in Islamic world, still took a lot of refugees based on, okay, these are Islamic brothers and sisters. That notion is throughout the Islamic world, right? That you need to take care of them. Not to say that there is hostility towards non-believers in terms of from speaking from Muslim perspective. That, for example, if a Christian comes to my town and say that I want to take refuge in your town, I don't think my Muslims neighbors there would deny him any chance. But is that true for every single subculture in Islamic world? No, that's not true.
No,
Right? So
I
that's
think it varies neighborhood to neighborhood and person to person.
yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, you don't necessarily see like a ton of, you know, like, okay, we're Ukrainian Christians and we need a place to go, and then Turkey, will you take us? Right? Like it's not really like that kind of place. What I will say that what Turkey did wind up doing was taking a lot of Russians who ran from Russia. There's a different political relationship there altogether,
Mm.
and simply because they could offer something economically. You know, they were coming with you know, more money than the average Turk has.
So, from a biblical perspective, there's this great passage in Deuteronomy 10 that says, "For the Lord your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, the great, the mighty, the awesome God, who is not partial and takes no bribe. He executes justice for the fatherless and the widow and loves the sojourner," meaning foreigner. Giving the sojourner food and clothing. Love the sojourner, therefore, for you were sojourners in the land of Egypt.
Mm.
So there's an inbuilt love for foreigners within the Bible, and there is an expectation, right? So there's two things you have to hold in balance as a Christian. God has organized the world into nations, and that is a good thing from God, and that's the way the world is supposed to work. And we're supposed to be compassionate to refugees and immigrants and extend love and hospitality towards people. And you have to find some way to balance those things properly. On an individual level, it's easy. You show kindness and hospitality to everyone in your path. On a government level, that's much more difficult because as a government, you have to weigh up pros and cons and your responsibilities to your people versus the people around the world. And the government has to think differently than the average individual thinks.
I mean, I think that in terms of what's happening now, and you know, kind of what we talked about in the first segment, um, what we're kind of seeing, particularly here in the United States. So I'm going to speak to it more from the position of, um, you know, myself. I've lived here in this country for my pretty much my whole life, and I'm a Christian. I think we have like we have an opportunity. I don't think we have an opportunity as Christians now. Like, you know, the church that I go to got the same emails from you know, different like World Relief and all these other stuff saying like, well, you know, we don't know what we're going to do for money and everything else like that. For the now emails are circulating between all the pastors groups that I know and all that other stuff. Like, what can we do? Like, how can we step in? How can we fill this void? And I think as Christians, right, like, I can't affect national policy. I can't call up Trump and be like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? And there's, lots of people are going to jump up and down and point at this policy and that policy. But then when their guy's in, they'll look the other way, right? Like, but as Christians, what we can say is, what can I do? Right? What can I do to like love my neighbor as I love myself? Jesus said that there were two commandments, right? Main commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. He's actually reciting the Shema and the V'ahavta at that point, right? Two very important tenets. And he says the entire law rests upon these two. And he embodies those two laws, right? He is God. He reflects also the love of God, right? In obedience and passion and in service to others. And then on top of that, he loves everyone with an unconditional, agape love, that is unmerited. So I think we can look at the opportunities we have as Christians, right? Mm-hmm. And we can say, put the politics aside, put all the craziness aside, put all of the rhetoric aside, and say there are real people who are going through real things, and that however they got here, how can I do good to them, right? Like how can I bless people? How can I help them? I understand, they could be gone tomorrow, right? Like ICE could come in and just be like you and you and you and you and you, right? And I can't control that, right? Like I voted. that's my role in the process, right?
I sorry to interrupt you. I have a question, or maybe a little concern or observation, more likely. In the United States, when we think of racial injustices, that those people who are anti-immigrants, who are mostly, I would call it on this screen, racist, are dominated or associated a lot with Christianity. How do you guys think of that?
You bring this up with 1 minute to go. Okay.
And for the after party.
Yeah. So just in summary, and we'll do another episode on this. Maybe this is our next episode. But in general, how I think about this is that this is a result of either a liberal or a sort of immature Christianity. And when I use liberal, I'm not talking about politically liberal. I'm talking about taking the Bible loosely. Mm-hmm. So if you look at a lot of, racist Christians, you have things like believing the mark of Cain is black skin, things like that. You have a idea that there's this Noah curses Canaan, and they believe that's a curse on black people. All of that is extra biblical superstition that people are reading back into the Bible. It's not in the Bible. You have to add things to the Bible in order to get there. Or
exempt things,
right?
Like the slave owner's Bible was.
Yes, they gave right. You got to exempt things. On the other hand, like in modern America, I don't think I think a lot of that is not having a proper understanding of the relationship between church and the state. So people get so caught up in the current political discourse, which is either pro-immigrant or anti-immigrant. And I think you can entirely compartmentalize your views of what the border should be and how you, the individual, should treat the person right in front of you. Like, we know Christians who believe in the border wall, who vote for Trump, who want less immigration, and are currently housing Iranian asylum seekers in their house.
Right. That's the right approach.
Right. That's what I want to see, right? And that is not a contradiction at all. Mm-hmm. Because you understand that the state, the church, and the individual all have different roles to play in this.
Right. I think it's also important, like, to look at the Bible holistically too, right? So, you're supposed to show peace and blessings and, hospitality and all those other things to strangers. But a house divided against itself cannot stand, right? And we're definitely divided against ourselves, and we're not called to that division. We're not called to chaos. God, it says in the book of Romans that God is a God of order and peace, right? And when we don't have order and peace, we have to ask why we don't have it. You know, sure, the different like takes on what order is a different story, but peace is universal, right? Like peace is this idea that we're not at enmity with each other. We're not at enmity with with our neighbors, you know.
So I think to close, what I'd say is to Christians who are myopically Republican and xenophobic, and to Christians who are like leaning, left wing and want the government to fix all their problems. You cannot pick and choose what from the Bible you believe. You have to take all of it or none of it.
Yep.
It is the word of God. The words in black are the words of the Holy Spirit, and you can't ignore any of it.